What's good, dog parents? Welcome back to Canine Dog Talk, the only channel that breaks down the canine mind so you can actually understand what the heck your furry best friend is thinking. Let's keep it 100% real for a second. You love your dog. They are family, but sometimes they drive you absolutely up the wall. You buy the expensive toys, you get the premium kibble, you provide a loving home, and how do they repay you? By dragging you down the street like a freight train on your morning walk, by shredding your favorite pair of sneakers, or by barking at literally.
If you are feeling frustrated, exhausted, or completely overwhelmed by your dog's behavior, take a deep breath. You are not a bad owner and your dog is not broken. The issue is a massive communication gap. You see, humans operate on logic, language, and emotion. Dogs operate on instinct, environmental reinforcement, and associative learning. When those two worlds collide without translation, chaos ensues. Today, we are diving deep into the top 5 most common problems dog owners face. But we aren't just giving you basic Band-Aid fixes. We are going full dog psychology educational style. We are going to map out the neuroscience, the behavioral drives, and the root causes of these issues so you can finally speak their language. Buckle up, hit that subscribe button, and let's hack your dog's brain. Problem number 1, the leash pulling nightmare. Let's paint the picture. You step outside, clip the leash on, and suddenly your sweet little pup turns into an Olympic sled dog. Your shoulder socket is getting dislocated, you are yelling heel, and your dog is entirely ignoring you. Why does this happen? To understand this, we have to look at a psychological concept called the opposition reflex. Dogs have a hardwired neurological response to push against pressure. When you pull back on the leash, their brain literally tells them to pull forward harder to maintain their balance and forward momentum. You are inadvertently triggering a physical resistance reflex. Furthermore, we have to talk about environmental value. When a dog walks out the front door, they are hit with a tsunami of olfactory information. To a canine, smelling a fire hydrant is like reading the morning news, checking social media, and watching a blockbuster movie all at once. The environment is massively rewarding. Every time they pull and you take a step forward, you have rewarded the pulling. You have taught them that tension equals forward progress. It is classical operant conditioning. They have learned that dragging you is the operational mechanism required to access the smells they desire. To fix this, we have to fundamentally rewrite the dog's value system. You need to become more valuable than the environment. This involves engagement training. Before you even take a step, your dog needs to understand that eye contact and proximity to your leg yield high-value rewards. We utilize the Pramack principle, which dictates that a high-probability behavior, like sniffing a bush, can be used to reinforce a low-probability behavior, like walking nicely at your side. By stopping dead in your tracks the millisecond tension hits the leash, you remove the environmental reward. The pressure must mean stop, not go. Over hundreds of repetitions, the canine brain rewires itself to understand that a loose leash is the ultimate key to unlocking the world. Problem number 2, separation anxiety and hyperattachment. You grab your car keys and your dog starts panting, pacing, and whining. You leave for 30 minutes and you come back to scratched doors, destroyed blinds, and a noise complaint from your neighbor. Separation anxiety is one of the most heartbreaking and misunderstood psychological issues in the canine world. Many owners think their dog is doing this out of spite or anger because they were left behind. That is projecting human emotion onto a canine. Dogs do not possess spite. What they are experiencing is a literal panic attack. From an evolutionary standpoint, dogs are pack animals. In the wild, isolation equals death. For a biologically insecure dog, being separated from their primary attachment figure spikes their cortisol levels, the stress hormone, through the roof. Their prefrontal cortex, the logical part of the brain, completely shuts down and the amygdala, the fear center, takes over. They scratch at the door because they are desperately trying to reunite with their survival source. They vocalize to call you back. The destructive chewing is a coping mechanism. The physical act of gnawing releases endorphins that temporarily soothe their shattered nervous system. Curing separation anxiety requires a methodical process called systematic desensitization. You cannot just leave an anxious dog alone to cry it out. That concept, known as flooding, usually makes the trauma exponentially worse. Instead, we have to break down the triggers. We start by desensitizing your departure cues. You pick up your keys, put on your shoes, and then you sit down on the couch and watch TV. You do this until the dog realizes those sounds no longer predict abandonment. Then you practice micro departures. You step outside the door for 1 second, then return. Then 2 seconds, then 5. The goal is to return before the dog ever crosses their emotional threshold into panic. We are slowly expanding their window of tolerance, teaching their nervous system that isolation is safe and temporary. Problem number 3, excessive and nuisance barking. Barking is a dog's primary vocal communication tool, but when it becomes incessant, it can ruin your peace of mind. To stop the barking, we first have to diagnose the psychological motivation behind it. Dogs do not bark just to hear their own voice. Every bark has a function. We generally categorize this into 3 types: alert barking, demand barking, and boredom barking. Alert barking is deeply ingrained in their genetics. Certain breeds, like guarding breeds and terriers, were selectively bred for centuries to notify the pack of environmental changes. When they bark at the male carrier, and the male carrier walks away, the dog believes their barking successfully chased away an intruder. The behavior is incredibly self-reinforcing. Demand barking is a completely different beast. This is when your dog looks you dead in the eyes and barks because they want your food, they want a toy, or they want attention. Here is the brutal truth about demand barking. If you look at them, talk to them, yell at them, or push them away, you have just rewarded the bark. Negative attention is still attention. By engaging, you have confirmed that vocalizing manipulates the human. To extinguish demand barking, you must utilize a psychological tactic called extinction. You must completely remove the reinforcement. You turn your back. You break eye contact. You become a stone wall. Initially, the barking will get worse. This is called an extinction burst. But if you hold strong, the dog's brain will eventually realize this behavioral pathway is a dead end. Boredom barking stems from a severe lack of mental and physical stimulation. A dog left alone in a backyard with 0 tasks will eventually find a job to do, and usually, that job is aggressively barking at leaves blowing in the wind. This is a manifestation of unspent kinetic energy. The canine mind is built to problem solve, forage, and work. When we deprive them of species-appropriate outlets, neuroses develop. The solution here isn't a bark collar, it is lifestyle enrichment. Incorporating puzzle toys, obedience training, and rigorous physical exercise depletes the dog's battery, leaving them too satisfied and tired to obsess over ambient noises. Problem number 4, destructive chewing and household sabotage. Coming home to a living room that looks like it was hit by a snowstorm because your dog shredded the couch cushions is a rite of passage for many owners. But why do they target our most valuable possessions? During puppyhood, this is driven by teething. The physical discomfort of adult teeth erupting requires the mechanical counterpressure of chewing to alleviate pain. However, when an adult dog destroys your house, we are looking at a combination of high prey drive, olfactory stimulation, and once again, profound understimulation. Dogs experience the world primarily through their noses and their mouths. When a dog chews your favorite pair of shoes, they aren't punishing you. Those shoes are saturated in your specific scent profile. For a dog, holding an object that smells intensely like their owner provides a massive sense of comfort. Furthermore, the act of ripping, tearing, and dissecting a couch cushion triggers the ancient predatory sequence hardwired into their DNA. Stalk, chase, grab, bite, kill, dissect, and consume. Tearing the stuffing out of a pillow mimics the dissection phase of a hunt. It is deeply, biologically satisfying. To manage this, we utilize a concept called environmental management paired with redirection. If your dog chews your shoes, the first failure was leaving the shoes accessible. Management means utilizing crates, playpens, and closed doors to prevent the rehearsal of the bad behavior. Every time a dog successfully shreds a pillow, the neural pathway reinforcing that joy becomes thicker and stronger. You must break the cycle. Next, you must provide legal high-value outlets for their chewing drive. Bully sticks, frozen stuffed Kongs, and durable chew toys must be readily available. When you catch them eyeing the table leg, you do not just say no. You say no, chew this instead. We are not suppressing the drive. We are channeling the drive into an appropriate, owner-approved target. Problem number 5. The recall failure, or not coming when called. This is arguably the most dangerous behavioral problem on this list. A dog without a solid recall is a liability. You take your dog to the park, you let them off the leash, and when it is time to go, you call their name. They look at you, calculate their options, and sprint in the opposite direction. Why? Because you have poisoned your own recall command. Let's analyze the psychological math happening in your dog's head in that exact moment. Every decision a dog makes is based on a cost-benefit analysis. On one side of the scale, there is a squirrel, another dog to play with, and massive open space to run. On the other side of the scale is you, holding a boring leash, ready to clip them in, put them in the car, and end their fun. The environment simply holds a higher currency value than you do. Furthermore, humans often ruin the recall word by using it to summon the dog for negative experiences. If you call "come right" before giving them a bath they hate, clipping their nails, or leaving the park, the word "come" quickly becomes a predictor of punishment. They learn to avoid the word. Building a flawless recall requires establishing an infallible history of massive reinforcement. The word "come" must become the highest-paying lottery ticket in your dog's universe. We start training this in a highly controlled, zero-distraction environment like a hallway. You say the command once. The dog comes and you throw an absolute party. High-value treats, incredible enthusiasm, and play. You must charge the command. Then you slowly increase the difficulty, moving to a fenced yard and eventually an open field on a long line. Crucially, you must call them to you, reward them heavily, and then release them back to play. This teaches the dog that returning to you doesn't mean the fun stops. It means they get paid, and then the fun continues. You establish yourself as the ultimate center of joy and resource provision. To truly synthesize the behavioral mechanics discussed here, we must look at the principles of canine cognitive behavioral modification. Every single interaction you share with your canine companion is a training session. Whether you are actively conscious of it or not, your dog is constantly recording data, analyzing your reactions, and adjusting their behavioral algorithms accordingly. When we look at issues like leash reactivity or demand barking, we are observing the end result of a long chain of micro-reinforcements. The canine brain is a master of associative learning. They link specific environmental triggers to specific outcomes with astonishing speed. Therefore, the onus of behavioral change rests entirely on the handler. We must cultivate a deep awareness of our own body language, our timing, and our consistency. By controlling the antecedents, the events that happen right before the behavior occurs, we can effectively manipulate the outcome. This requires a massive paradigm shift from the owner. You must stop reacting emotionally to the symptom and start responding analytically to the root cause. Expanding upon this specific analytical framework, the behavioral variance across different developmental stages cannot be overstated. When examining the neuroplasticity of a juvenile canine versus an adult, the methodology must adapt. Puppies process environmental stimuli through rapid associative binding, meaning single-event learning can either create a phobia or cement a positive trigger instantly. Conversely, adult canines present entrenched neural pathways requiring sustained counterconditioning to dismantle established coping mechanisms. The application of these principles across sporting groups, herding groups, and toy breeds further illustrates the necessity of a highly individualized approach. A generic, one-size-fits-all training methodology is structurally destined to fail because it ignores the unique genetic blueprint and historical reinforcement schedule of the individual organism. True behavioral mastery demands a nuanced, deeply observant protocol. Furthermore, Synthesizing the handler's psychological state during these interventions highlights the symbiotic nature of the relationship. The phenomenon of emotional contagion between human and canine has been extensively documented in ethological studies. When the handler experiences frustration, their respiration rate alters, muscular tension increases, and micro-expressions shift. The canine, highly attuned to these subtle biological markers, interprets this data as an environmental threat, thereby elevating their own defensive drives. Therefore, achieving behavioral compliance is inextricably linked to the handler's ability to maintain a state of calm assertiveness. The journey of modifying a dog's behavior is, in reality, a profound exercise in human self-regulation, requiring the handler to transcend their emotional reflexes and operate with clinical, calculated patience. Furthermore, we have to consider the profound impact of genetics and breed-specific fulfillment. Humans have spent thousands of years selectively breeding dogs to perform highly specialized, demanding tasks. We engineered border collies to herd sheep across vast mountainous terrains, Malinois to apprehend threats, and retrievers to retrieve waterfowl from freezing lakes. Today, we take these high-octane, working-line genetics and place them in suburban apartments with 3 walks a day. This massive biological mismatch is the source of endless behavioral pathology. The destruction, the neuroses, the hyperactivity. These are not signs of a bad dog. They are the symptoms of an unemployed working dog desperately trying to find an outlet for their hardwired drives. If you want to solve behavioral problems, you must provide genetic fulfillment. You must engage their predatory sequence through structured play, utilize their olfactory capabilities through scent work, and challenge their intellect through complex obedience framing. When a dog is truly, deeply fulfilled, the behavioral static simply melts away. Expanding upon this specific analytical framework, the behavioral variance across different developmental stages cannot be overstated. When examining the neuroplasticity of a juvenile canine versus an adult, the methodology must adapt. Puppies process environmental stimuli through rapid associative binding, meaning single-event learning can either create a phobia or cement a positive trigger instantly. Conversely, adult canines present entrenched neural pathways requiring sustained counter-conditioning to dismantle established coping mechanisms. The application of these principles across sporting groups, herding groups, and toy breeds further illustrates the necessity of a highly individualized approach. A generic, one-size-fits-all training methodology is structurally destined to fail because it ignores the unique genetic blueprint and historical reinforcement schedule of the individual organism. True behavioral mastery demands a nuanced, deeply observant protocol. Furthermore, synthesizing the handler's psychological state during these interventions highlights the symbiotic nature of the relationship. The phenomenon of emotional contagion between human and canine has been extensively documented in ethological studies. When the handler experiences frustration, their respiration rate alters, muscular tension increases, and micro-expressions shift. The canine, highly attuned to these subtle biological markers, interprets this data as an environmental threat, thereby elevating their own defensive drives. Therefore, achieving behavioral compliance is inextricably linked to the handler's ability to maintain a state of calm assertiveness. The journey of modifying a dog's behavior is, in reality, a profound exercise in human self-regulation, requiring the handler to transcend their emotional reflexes and operate with clinical, calculated patience. Let us also examine the concept of spatial pressure and threshold management. Every dog has a specific threshold for stimuli, whether that stimulus is a passing bicycle, another dog, or a loud noise. When the dog is below threshold, the prefrontal cortex is engaged, and learning can occur. The dog is rational and capable of processing commands. However, once the dog crosses that invisible line and goes over threshold, their nervous system enters the sympathetic fight-or-flight state. Learning becomes biologically impossible. Their pupil dilate, their heart rate skyrockets, and they become purely reactive. The biggest mistake novice handlers make is attempting to train a dog that is already over threshold. You cannot reason with a panic attack. The key to successful behavioral modification is identifying the exact distance and intensity at which your dog remains under threshold and performing your counter-conditioning protocols there. You systematically decrease the distance and increase the intensity over weeks and months, gradually expanding their capacity to handle environmental stress without tipping into reactivity. It is a slow, methodical process that requires immense patience and empathy. Expanding upon this specific analytical framework, the behavioral variance across different developmental stages cannot be overstated. When examining the neuroplasticity of a juvenile canine versus an adult, the methodology must adapt. Puppies process environmental stimuli through rapid associative binding, meaning single-event learning can either create a phobia or cement a positive trigger instantly. Conversely, adult canines present entrenched neural pathways requiring sustained counter-conditioning to dismantle established coping mechanisms. The application of these principles across sporting groups, herding groups, and toy breeds further illustrates the necessity of a highly individualized approach. A generic, one-size-fits-all training methodology is structurally destined to fail because it ignores the unique genetic blueprint and historical reinforcement schedule of the individual organism. True behavioral mastery demands a nuanced, deeply observant protocol. Furthermore, synthesizing the handler's psychological state during these interventions highlights the symbiotic nature of the relationship. The phenomenon of emotional contagion between human and canine has been extensively documented in ethological studies. When the handler experiences frustration, their respiration rate alters, muscular tension increases, and micro-expressions shift. The canine, highly attuned to these subtle biological markers, interprets this data as an environmental threat, thereby elevating their own defensive drives. Therefore, achieving behavioral compliance is inextricably linked to the handler's ability to maintain a state of calm assertiveness. The journey of modifying a dog's behavior is, in reality, a profound exercise in human self-regulation, requiring the handler to transcend their emotional reflexes and operate with clinical, calculated patience. Another vital component of canine psychology is the establishment of a clear, consistent reinforcement schedule. B.F. Skinner's work on operant conditioning demonstrated that the timing and frequency of rewards drastically dictate the strength of a behavior. Many dog owners inadvertently utilize a variable ratio reinforcement schedule for bad behavior. For example, if your dog jumps on you for attention and you ignore them 5 times, but on the 6th time you finally crack and pet them, you have just taught them persistence. You have turned the bad behavior into a slot machine. They know a payout is coming eventually, so they will keep pulling the lever. To eradicate a problem behavior, the extinction must be absolute and uncompromising. Conversely, when teaching a new, desired behavior like a solid recall, we start with a continuous reinforcement schedule, rewarding every single correct repetition. Once the behavior is fluent, we transition to a variable schedule to build resilience and speed. Understanding these reinforcement mechanics allows you to sculpt your dog's decision-making matrix with precision. Expanding upon this specific analytical framework, the behavioral variance across different developmental stages cannot be overstated. When examining the neuroplasticity of a juvenile canine versus an adult, the methodology must adapt. Puppies process environmental stimuli through rapid associative binding, meaning single-event learning can either create a phobia or cement a positive trigger instantly. Conversely, adult canines present entrenched neural pathways requiring sustained counter-conditioning to dismantle established coping mechanisms. The application of these principles across sporting groups, herding groups, and toy breeds further illustrates the necessity of a highly individualized approach. A generic, one-size-fits-all training methodology is structurally destined to fail because it ignores the unique genetic blueprint and historical reinforcement schedule of the individual organism. True behavioral mastery demands a nuanced, deeply observant protocol. Furthermore, synthesizing the handler's psychological state during these interventions highlights the symbiotic nature of the relationship. The phenomenon of emotional contagion between human and canine has been extensively documented in ethological studies. When the handler experiences frustration, their respiration rate alters, muscular tension increases, and micro-expressions shift. The canine, highly attuned to these subtle biological markers, interprets this data as an environmental threat, thereby elevating their own defensive drives. Therefore, achieving behavioral compliance is inextricably linked to the handler's ability to maintain a state of calm assertiveness. The journey of modifying a dog's behavior is, in reality, a profound exercise in human self-regulation, requiring the handler to transcend their emotional reflexes and operate with clinical, calculated patience. Finally, we must address the ultimate foundation of the human-canine bond: leadership and advocacy. In the dog training community, the term leadership is often misinterpreted as physical dominance or intimidation. That is an archaic, debunked methodology. True leadership in the canine paradigm is about resource control, emotional regulation, and advocacy. Your dog needs to view you as the calm, capable pilot of their life. If you become frantic, angry, or anxious when another dog approaches, your dog feels that tension transmitting right down the leash. They conclude that you are incapable of handling the situation, so they step up to protect the pack. By remaining stoic, clear, and decisive, you communicate to your dog that you have the environment under control. Furthermore, advocacy means protecting your dog from overwhelming situations. If your dog is afraid of strangers, do not force them to endure unwanted petting. Step in, block the person, and protect your dog's space. When your dog truly trusts that you will advocate for their safety, their need to react defensively diminishes drastically. Trust is the ultimate currency in dog training. Expanding upon this specific analytical framework, the behavioral variance across different developmental stages cannot be overstated. When examining the neuroplasticity of a juvenile canine versus an adult, the methodology must adapt. Puppies process environmental stimuli through rapid associative binding, meaning single-event learning can either create a phobia or cement a positive trigger instantly. Conversely, adult canines present entrenched neural pathways requiring sustained counter-conditioning to dismantle established coping mechanisms. The application of these principles across sporting groups, herding groups, and toy breeds further illustrates the necessity of a highly individualized approach. A generic, one-size-fits-all training methodology is structurally destined to fail because it ignores the unique genetic blueprint and historical reinforcement schedule of the individual organism. True behavioral mastery demands a nuanced, deeply observant protocol. Furthermore, synthesizing the handler's psychological state during these interventions highlights the symbiotic nature of the relationship. The phenomenon of emotional contagion between human and canine has been extensively documented in ethological studies. When the handler experiences frustration, their respiration rate alters, muscular tension increases, and micro-expressions shift. The canine, highly attuned to these subtle biological markers, interprets this data as an environmental threat, thereby elevating their own defensive drives. Therefore, achieving behavioral compliance is inextricably linked to the handler's ability to maintain a state of calm assertiveness. The journey of modifying a dog's behavior is, in reality, a profound exercise in human self-regulation, requiring the handler to transcend their emotional reflexes and operate with clinical, calculated patience. All right, Canine Dog Talk family. That is the deep dive into the top 5 common dog owner problems mapped out through the lens of pure canine psychology. We covered the opposition reflex causing your leash pulling, the crippling cortisol spikes behind separation anxiety, the extinction protocols for demand barking, the genetic drives creating household destruction, and the behavioral economics required to build a bulletproof recall. It is a lot of information, but understanding the why is the only way to permanently fix the what. You have the tools now. It is time to step up, put in the reps, and become the leader your dog desperately needs. If this video gave you a massive aha moment and helped you finally understand your four-legged best friend, you know exactly what to do. Smash that like button, hit subscribe to join the Canine Dog Talk pack, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a breakdown. Drop a comment below right now and tell me, which of these 5 problems is your dog struggling with the most, and what strategy are you going to implement today? Let's get a conversation going in the comments. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Keep training, keep building that bond, and I will catch you in the next episode.